week 3 of our course already, in which we will continue our discussion of externalities. Remember, externalities may be one reason why markets fail to achieve efficient outcomes, and that happens when people do not face the full costs or benefits of their decision. Costs in the case of negative externalities and benefits in the case of positive externalities. And those externalities are only a problem if people cannot sort it out amongst themselves. So when the private solution is not possible, which is likely to be the case when many parties are involved, and that often leads to high transaction costs. And when the parties cannot agree on the cost and the benefits of the externality and of solving the externality. In that case, there are actually missing markets, trading opportunities that are not exploited, and as a consequence, welfare is lower than it could be. Right, so now there's several things you can do about it, as we discussed. So we can have pretty rough policies like just reducing pollution in the case of a negative externality. We can have also somewhat smarter policies aimed at providing an incentive to producers to adopt cleaner technology. You can do that in 3 ways, by having an emissions fee, a cap and trade scheme, or by command and control. Let me start with the discussion of last week's experiment. Well, actually, that was 2 weeks ago already, and how it relates to what we discussed in week 1 of externalities. Doing this experiment online was sort of challenging. That was also the very first time, and thanks so much for thinking along, for example, about the issue of sending chats and all that. And obviously it was not ideal, but I think it was all worth the effort, because it helps you to actually experience what externalities do and do not do, actually. That's also a very important part of it. Alright, so let's start with session 1. Remember, that was the free market, no troubles, no externalities in round 1. And then the good part was that we had quite a few deals, even though information traveled less easily than in the class, where you can just run around, right? And suppliers can approach demanders and the other way around. Now we had a lot of surplus being generated, in total 760. One student, Tanishka Deora, actually did very well. She actually made a profit of 21. The good part of the second round of session 1 was that also that it seemed like many deals were made and lots of profits were made, that the surplus actually went up. That makes sense that it happens, so you learn along the way, and as a result we get better deals in the second round. So one more deal, and Rishi Ashok Kumar even had a profit of 27. So the round 1 was sort of successful in generating a lot of surplus, i.e. welfare, and also if we ignore the negative externality in round 2, it seemed like we had lots of good news, right? So this could be a news article related to this. Industrial production reached unprecedented levels last month, reports the Department of Commerce in its monthly bulletin. So everything is looking good. However, in round 2 there was also something that looked less nice, namely the negative externality, right? So that was the bad part. Because every deal that was made generated a lot of smoke, right? We looked at aluminium production, so every deal generated $20 in pollution damages. So per person that means like 16 cents of pollution damage, which may not look like much, but if you look at the number of deals that were made, 47, then the pollution damage per person was $7.60. So that's pretty hefty, right? Because if you subtract that from your profit, then it turns out that that last and half of you actually ended up in the plus. So in this case, it seemed like you generate a lot of welfare because you made a lot of deals with a lot of surplus. But if we then actually look at the downside of all this production, all this air pollution, and we put a dollar value on this air pollution, and we subtract that from all of the surplus that was being generated, then basically the whole surplus disappears. Right? It's a negligible level of welfare that remains. So then this is sort of the downside of all that production. And then this will be a more fitting news article. Levels of air pollution have reached unprecedented levels last month, reports the EPA in its monthly bulletin. So then, actually in round 2, with negative externality, we would have been better off just doing nothing. You guys went through a lot of effort making deals and all that, and you try to really make a lot of money, a lot of surplus, to compensate for the pollution damage, and that was going to be announced at the end of the round. But as a society, we would have been better off just doing nothing, just sitting on our hands, and then welfare would have been almost similar, because welfare is now only 17. If you would not have done anything, there would have been no surplus, but also no pollution damage, so welfare would be 0, which is almost equal. The lesson from session 1 is that this negative externality in round 2 didn't really change your behavior, right? If anything, you tried harder, i.e., if anything, you generated more pollution. So this shows that this is a true externality, right? It's something that you impose on others, but it's not something that we tend to focus on. We tend to focus on, okay, how can I make sure that I make a deal, and that I make a deal that gets on the basis of which I get a lot of profit, so that compensates for pollution damage. And remember, because the definition of a negative production externality was an action of an individual that affects another individual for which the latter is not paid. Because we impose air pollution, a negative externality, on others as a result of our deal, but we can do so without paying those subjected to the air pollution. We just impose it on them, and that's a cost to them. That's the pollution damage. And I, as a producer and also as a demander, I do not face those costs, right? So I may not take them into account. So then the question is, so why should this not be efficient? And how would the quotient solution look like? Now remember, efficiency had to do, in this case, with trading opportunities not being exploited. So what are we talking about? Well, basically, there's something that people value, namely clean air. And we care about it because air pollution may do us harm. actually what I impose on others by making a deal, yeah, I should actually pay for it, right? Because I take something away from others, namely clean air. So, but that's not what I do, right? So it would have been better if I, as a producer, would actually pay for the pollution that I generate by making a deal with the demander. Now, second part, how would a quotient solution look like? How could you do that? Well, what we could do is approach certain suppliers and say, well, would you actually mind not making a deal? And we will actually pay you to do so. And we are willing to do that because if you do make a deal, then you actually impose damage on society. Now, as we will see more closely in session 2, we don't approach suppliers randomly. There are certain suppliers that we would like to approach with this demand of, would you please not make a deal? And other suppliers that we want to leave alone. We already discussed this during the experiment, right? That we may want to kill trades. So we may want to ask suppliers not to make a deal if they contribute less than 20 to society. So if the surplus generated by a deal creates less than 20, then actually that deal does more harm than good. Because say that the seller makes 5 on a deal, the demander makes 5, so together that is 10, which looks good to the individual supplier and demander. They each get 5, but the trouble is that the summation 10 is lower than 20, so they add more harm to society. All of us are suffering from that. And we would like to offer them a deal to say, well, here you get your 5, and why don't you stay put? Is that likely to occur? What do you think, right? There's 2 major conditions. The second one is that the costs and benefits should be clear. Well, in this case, that is true, right? So everything has been put in dollar terms. So there can be no debate about that. That's obviously in reality that's often not the case, but in our experiment that's the case. But the first condition is that the transaction costs should not be prohibitively high, and that is very strong. That's highly related to the number of parties involved. Now there's 124 students, and is it likely that there are more than 100 students are going to agree on something like this? Not really. It will take a very long time, i.e. the transaction cost will be really high, i.e. this is sort of a complex actionality for which we expect to see no quotient solution, i.e. private solution.